My wife went on a week-long girls' trip with her wealthy friends. She came back pregnant by her best friend's husband. Here's how I made sure she paid for it. All right, Reddit, grab your popcorn because this one's a ride. My wife went on vacation with her rich friends, came back carrying another man's kid, and expected me to just deal with it. Spoiler alert, I didn't. I'm 32 male, an insurance claims adjuster. Not glamorous, but it pays the bills and comes with decent benefits. My wife, Grace, 29, worked for some nonprofit doing event planning. We'd been married for 6 years, together for 8 total, and for most of that time things were good. Not Instagram perfect, but solid. We had our 2-bedroom house in the suburbs, a Honda and a Ford in the driveway, and the kind of life where our biggest stress was deciding between Home Depot or Lowe's on Saturday mornings. The house was a fixer-upper we'd bought right after getting married. Nothing fancy, just a 1980s ranch-style place with good bones and terrible carpet. I'd spent 2 years of weekends ripping out that carpet, refinishing the hardwood underneath, updating the kitchen cabinets myself because contractors wanted $5 grand for what I did with $200 and a lot of YouTube tutorials. Grace had picked out paint colors and organized the whole thing, made it feel like home instead of just a house. We were proud of it in that way. You're proud of things you built yourself, even if they're not impressive to anyone else. Our cars were both paid off, which felt like a massive achievement in a world where everyone seemed to lease new vehicles every 3 years. The Honda was Grace's daily driver, a 2014 Accord with 90,000 miles that ran like a dream. My Ford F-150 was older, a 2011 I'd bought used with 60,000 miles, but it was perfect for hauling supplies when I needed to do home repairs or help friends move furniture. We weren't struggling, but we weren't comfortable either. That weird middle-class space where you can pay your bills and occasionally splurge on dinner out, but a major car repair or medical emergency would throw everything into chaos. We had a modest emergency fund that we contributed to religiously, retirement accounts that were growing slowly but steadily, and a budget spreadsheet that I updated every Sunday night like some kind of financial ritual. Then there was Melissa. Melissa Chen was Grace's college best friend, and the living embodiment of everything we weren't. While we were clipping coupons and debating whether the name brand ketchup was worth the extra dollar, Melissa was flying first class to Europe and buying shoes that cost more than our mortgage payment. Her husband Brandon made some ridiculous amount of money in venture capital or private equity or whatever it is that rich guys do when they wear $1,000 suits and pretend to work. Last I heard, he was pulling in somewhere north of $500,000 annually, which might as well have been monopoly money for how disconnected it was from our reality. I'd met them a handful of times at dinner parties and charity galas that Grace somehow got us invited to. These events were always uncomfortable for me. I'd show up in my one decent suit that I'd bought at Men's Warehouse 3 years ago, surrounded by people wearing designer labels I couldn't even pronounce. The conversations would inevitably turn to vacation homes and private schools and investment strategies that required 6 figures of disposable income to even participate in. Brandon seemed decent enough for a guy who probably had someone iron his socks, remembered your name, asked polite questions about your job even though he clearly didn't care about insurance claims, the whole fake genuine routine that rich people perfect. He had this way of making you feel heard without actually listening, nodding at appropriate intervals while his eyes scanned the room for more important people to network with. Still, compared to some of the other wealthy jerks in their circle, he was tolerable. Never made me feel poor directly, which I appreciated even though the entire environment did that job perfectly well on its own. Melissa was friendly in that way, where you could tell she was mentally calculating whether you were worth her time, but she treated Grace like gold, so I tolerated the whole dynamic. She'd known Grace since freshman year of college, back when they were both broke students splitting ramen packets and studying until 3 a.m. They'd stayed close even as their lives diverged into completely different trajectories. Melissa had married money and never worked a day after graduation, while Grace had taken the nonprofit route because she'd wanted to make a difference even though it paid terrible. Their friendship always had this weird dynamic where Melissa played the generous benefactor and Grace played the grateful recipient. Designer hand-me-downs that Melissa was done with would appear in our closet. Tickets to sold-out shows would materialize because Melissa's assistant had accidentally bought extras. Dinner at restaurants where entrees cost $50 would happen regularly because Melissa insisted on treating. It was charity disguised as friendship, and while I appreciated that Grace got to experience nice things, it always left a bad taste in my mouth. The thing about having rich friends, when you're decidedly not rich, is that there's always this weird power imbalance. Melissa would casually mention a weekend in Cabo like it was driving to Target, and Grace would come home with this look on her face like she'd just been reminded of everything we couldn't afford. I'd catch her scrolling through Melissa's Instagram, staring at pictures of infinity pools and champagne brunches, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. But we were happy, or at least I thought we were. Sure, we couldn't drop 10 grand on a whim for a tropical vacation, but we had each other, right? We had movie nights and takeout Fridays, and that comfortable routine that couples settle into after the initial excitement wears off. Looking back, maybe comfortable was the problem. Maybe comfortable was just another word for boring when your best friend's posting stories from a yacht in the Mediterranean. That Tuesday in March, everything changed. I was sprawled on our sectional couch, remote in hand, trying to decide between a basketball game and some documentary about unsolved crimes. Real edge-of-your-seat decision-making there. That's when Grace burst through the front door like she'd just won the lottery. Except her face had that specific expression that usually meant she was about to spend money we didn't have on something we didn't need. She kicked off her heels with this theatrical flourish that scattered them across our entryway. These weren't the Target clearance heels either. These were the ones she'd bought after her last Melissa hangout, the ones that cost $200, and that she'd sworn were an investment in her professional wardrobe. They were currently lying on our floor like expensive casualties of her excitement. "You're not going to believe what just happened," she announced, and I swear the windows rattled. I muted the TV and braced myself. Last time she'd started a conversation like that, we'd ended up with a timeshare in Orlando that we visited exactly once before realizing we'd been scammed. The time before that, she'd signed us up for couples painting classes, where I'd discovered I had the artistic ability of a concussed toddler. "Melissa just called," she continued, vibrating with barely contained energy. "She invited me on the most incredible girls' trip. She's renting out this entire beach resort for a week. Just her closest friends, no husbands, no responsibilities. Pure paradise. Melissa." Of course it was Melissa. "Let me guess," I said, already knowing this was going to hurt somehow. "She wants you to fly somewhere exotic, stay in a place with a name I can't pronounce, and live like royalty for a week while I hold down the fort here?" Grace gave me that look, the one that said I was being dramatic and ruining her moment. "She's covering everything," Grace said, plopping down next to me and grabbing my hands like she was about to deliver news that would change our lives. "The resort, the food, the spa treatments, literally everything. She booked the whole place and wants her best friends there to celebrate." "Celebrate what?" She shrugged. "Does it matter? It's a free vacation, babe. When's the last time I got to do something like this? When's the last time we could afford something like this?" She had a point. Between my insurance job and her nonprofit gig, we were solidly middle class with occasional dips into barely making it territory when unexpected expenses hit. Our idea of a vacation was usually a long weekend at a hotel 2 hours away with a questionable continental breakfast. The fanciest thing we'd done in the past year was splurge on the unlimited breadsticks at Olive Garden. "So when is this magical mystery tour happening?" I asked, though I already knew the answer wouldn't be convenient. "Next week." Of course it was next week. Rich people operated on a completely different timeline than us regular folks. They could just drop everything and disappear to paradise whenever the mood struck. Meanwhile, I had to submit vacation requests 3 weeks in advance and pray my boss didn't schedule a team meeting during my requested time off. "She said it was last minute because one of her other friends canceled," Grace continued. "She didn't want the reservation to go to waste. Isn't that sweet of her to think of me?" Sweet wasn't the word I'd use. Convenient, maybe. A wealthy woman throwing scraps to her less fortunate friend like feeding pigeons in the park, but I kept that thought to myself because the look on Grace's face was pure joy, and I wasn't enough of a jerk to steal that from her. "That's great, babe," I said, meaning it mostly. "You deserve a break. Go have fun with your friends." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation that would have made military operations look casual. Grace went shopping with a vengeance, which is terrifying when your wife suddenly has to compete with women who consider Nordstrom a discount store. New swimsuits appeared, not the Target clearance rack kind we usually bought, but actual designer pieces from boutiques I'd never heard of. Each one cost more than I'd spent on clothes in the past year. New sundresses materialized, flowy and expensive. New everything invaded our bedroom until it looked like a boutique had exploded. She got her hair done at a salon that required appointments booked weeks in advance, but somehow had an opening when she dropped Melissa's name. They did highlights and lowlights and some kind of treatment that cost $300. Her nails got transformed into these elaborate designs with tiny gems embedded in them. She bought new luggage because apparently her existing suitcases weren't resort appropriate. The shoes were their own category of financial damage. Sandals for the beach, wedges for dinner, flats for walking, heels for fancy events. I watched the credit card balance climb with each passing day, trying to remind myself that she deserved this, that she worked hard at her nonprofit job that paid peanuts, that she rarely asked for anything beyond our normal budget. That 1 week of letting her feel like she belonged in Melissa's world wouldn't kill us financially. We'd just eat ramen for a month and skip a few unnecessary expenses like heat and electricity. Are you sure you have enough stuff? I asked the night before she left, watching her attempt to cram what looked like an entire department store into 2 suitcases that we definitely couldn't afford. She threw a pillow at me, but she was smiling. That smile. That genuine, unfiltered happiness that I hadn't seen in months. Right then, watching her excitement, I thought maybe this trip was exactly what she needed. What we needed. A week apart to reset and appreciate what we had. The morning she left, she was up before dawn, double-checking everything and vibrating with nervous energy. I made coffee and toast that she barely touched because she was too excited to eat. Melissa had arranged for a car service to pick her up, because of course she had. Rich people don't do airport runs in 15-year-old Hondas. You're going to have an amazing time, I told her, pulling her close. And I meant it. She deserved to be pampered and treated like someone important, even if it was borrowed luxury from her wealthy friend. She kissed me hard, the kind of kiss that usually led to other things but couldn't, because the car was waiting. I'm going to miss you so much. I'll call every night and tell you everything. Just don't come back with any crazy ideas about redecorating with seashells or buying timeshares, I said. She laughed. No promises. The car arrived exactly on schedule because Melissa's world operated with Swiss watch precision. I helped load Grace's bags, which took longer than it should have because she'd packed like she was relocating permanently. The driver, some guy in an actual suit, handled the bags with professional efficiency, while I stood there in sweatpants feeling distinctly out of place in this production. Love you, Grace called out as she slid into the back seat. Don't burn the house down. Love you too. Have fun. I watched the black sedan disappear down our suburban street, taking my wife off to paradise. The house felt immediately empty without her energy, but I was genuinely happy for her. She deserved a week of luxury and friendship, even if it highlighted everything we couldn't normally afford. I had absolutely no idea I was watching my marriage drive away in that car. No clue that the woman who'd kissed me goodbye with such genuine affection would return carrying secrets that would detonate everything we'd built together. The first couple of days were fine. Great even. Grace called every night like she'd promised, gushing about the resort and the spa treatments and the incredible food. She sent pictures of pristine beaches and infinity pools and elaborately plated meals that probably cost more than our weekly grocery budget. Her friends looked gorgeous and happy in every photo, living their best lives in designer swimwear. I was happy for her, really. Seeing her that relaxed and joyful made the credit card damage feel almost worth it. Day 3, the calls got shorter. She was exhausted from activities and just wanted to sleep. Made sense. She was probably cramming 7 days' worth of luxury into every waking moment. Day 4, she texted instead of called. Super tired, talk tomorrow? Day 5, radio silence until late at night when she sent a quick miss you text that felt weirdly impersonal. Day 6, nothing until I texted her first, asking if everything was okay. She responded hours later with, all good, just busy enjoying paradise. The thing is, I'm not normally the paranoid type. I don't check phone records or track locations or do any of that jealous husband garbage. But there was something off about her sudden communication blackout that triggered this uncomfortable feeling in my gut. Like when you know something's wrong with your car before the engine light comes on. I told myself I was being ridiculous. She was on vacation with her friends, probably day drinking and getting massages and doing whatever rich women do at exclusive resorts. Of course she wasn't glued to her phone. That was the whole point of the trip. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Day 7, she finally called. Her voice sounded weird, forced cheerful, like she was reading from a script. Hey babe, just wanted to let you know we're having such an amazing time. Melissa extended the trip by 2 days. Hope that's okay. 2 more days of her being weird and distant. Sure. Why not? That's fine, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Glad you're having fun. Love you, she said quickly before hanging up. I stared at my phone for a solid minute after that call. Something was wrong. I couldn't put my finger on what exactly, but every instinct I had was screaming that something had fundamentally shifted. She came home on day 9, and I knew immediately. The second Grace walked through our front door, every alarm bell in my head went off at maximum volume. This wasn't the same woman who'd left. She looked thinner, which was weird for someone who'd spent 9 days being pampered at a luxury resort. Her eyes were puffy like she'd been crying recently, and she couldn't look directly at me. "Hey," she said softly, dropping her bags in the entryway. "Hey," I replied, studying her face. "Good trip?" "Yeah, amazing. I'm just really tired. Do you mind if I take a shower and just crash?" She disappeared into our bathroom before I could respond. I heard the water running for a long time, way longer than her usual showers. When she finally emerged, she went straight to bed without eating, without talking, without any of the excited debriefing I'd expected from someone who'd just spent 9 days in paradise. That night, I lay next to a woman I'd been married to for 6 years and felt like I was sleeping next to a stranger. The next few days were worse. Grace was distant in ways that had nothing to do with jet lag or readjusting to normal life. She'd space out during conversations, give one-word answers to questions, and spend hours just staring at her phone with this haunted expression. When I tried to ask about the trip, she'd give these vague, generic responses. It was great. The resort was beautiful. We had fun. Nothing specific, nothing detailed, nothing that matched the enthusiasm from her first few days there. 2 weeks after she got back, she started getting sick in the mornings. At first, she blamed it on food poisoning or a stomach bug she'd picked up at the resort. But when it continued day after day, this cold dread started settling in my chest. "You should see a doctor," I told her one morning after she'd spent 20 minutes in the bathroom. "It's just stress from getting back to work," she insisted. But I knew. Somewhere deep in my gut, I already knew. 3 weeks after the trip, Grace sat me down on the couch with tears streaming down her face. My heart was already preparing for impact before she opened her mouth. I'd known something was coming. You don't live with someone for 8 years without learning to read the signs. The way she'd been avoiding eye contact for days. The way she'd jump whenever her phone buzzed. The way she'd started spending more time in the bathroom, door locked, water running to mask whatever she was doing in there. "I need to tell you something," she started, and those 6 words confirmed everything. "I'm pregnant." The world tilted. We'd been using protection. We were always careful because we weren't ready for kids. Hell, we could barely afford the house we had. A baby wasn't in our plans for at least another 3 years. Maybe 5. We'd talked about it recently, actually. How we wanted to build up our savings more, maybe get promoted at our jobs, have some financial cushion before adding a whole human to our budget spreadsheet. "Okay," I said slowly, buying time while my brain tried to process. Part of me was already doing the math, trying to figure out how this was possible. We'd been careful. Always. Unless maybe there was that one time a few weeks before her trip when the protection had broken. But wouldn't she have taken Plan B? Or maybe, "We'll figure it out," I heard myself saying, autopilot engaged while my thoughts raced. "It's not ideal timing, but we can make it work." She was sobbing now, ugly crying that shook her whole body. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and desperate. Not happy pregnancy tears. Not scared, but excited tears. Something else entirely. "It's not yours." 4 words. That's all it took to detonate 6 years of marriage. I sat there, completely still, while she fell apart next to me. Part of my brain shut down. The emotional part. The part that should have been screaming or crying or throwing things. Instead, this strange calm settled over me like I was watching this happen to someone else. Like I was reading a police report about a stranger's life falling apart instead of living through my own personal nightmare. "Who?" I asked. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. Flat. Emotionless. Clinical, almost. Like I was asking about weather patterns instead of the destruction of everything I'd built my adult life around. "Brandon," she whispered, and somehow I'd already known. Some part of me had been putting pieces together without consciously realizing it. The weird text during her trip, her sudden distance when she got back, the way she'd flinched when I mentioned Melissa's name. Melissa's husband. Her best friend's husband. The guy who'd made polite conversation with me about insurance policies and the housing market at dinner parties. The rich, successful, seemingly decent guy who remembered my name and shook my hand firmly whenever we met. The man who had a wife who trusted him, who'd built a life with him, who'd invited my wife on a luxury vacation as an act of friendship. How? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the details. But I needed to understand. Needed to know how we'd gone from what I thought was a solid marriage to this nightmare sitting on my couch confessing to carrying another man's child. The story came out in broken pieces between her sobs. Melissa had thrown this elaborate dinner party on night 4 of the trip. Expensive food, the works, everyone dressed up like they were at some fancy gala instead of a casual vacation. Brandon had flown in for the night because apparently rich people can just appear wherever they want on a whim. Grace claimed they'd all had a little too much during dinner, that she'd stepped out onto the beach to clear her head, and Brandon had followed. That one thing led to another, and they'd ended up in one of the empty resort bungalows. That it was a one-time mistake fueled by too much celebration and too much opportunity. She swore it meant nothing, that she'd felt guilty immediately, that she'd been sick with remorse ever since, that she'd only realized she was pregnant a few days ago when the morning sickness wouldn't stop, and she'd taken a test in a panic. I listened to all of it with that same strange detachment, like I was reading a police report about someone else's life falling apart. "Does Melissa know?" I asked when she finally stopped talking. Grace shook her head. "Nobody knows except you and Brandon. He texted me after I found out, begging me not to tell anyone. Said it would destroy his marriage and his life." Right. His life. Because apparently my life and my marriage were just acceptable casualties of their drunken mistake. "I'm so sorry," Grace sobbed. "I'm so sorry. It was the worst mistake of my life. I love you. I never wanted to hurt you. Please, we can work through this. We can figure it out together." I stood up, calmly, methodically, like I was leaving a meeting at work. "I need some air," I said. I grabbed my keys and walked out of my own house. Drove aimlessly for hours, not really seeing where I was going. My brain kept trying to process what had just happened, but it was like trying to solve a puzzle when someone kept adding pieces that didn't fit. 6 years of marriage. Gone because my wife couldn't keep her pants on during a vacation that I couldn't even afford. A kid that wasn't mine growing inside my wife's body. Conceived with her best friend's husband at a luxury resort while I was home eating leftover pizza and watching basketball games alone. The rage came later, not immediately. First came this weird acceptance phase where everything felt surreal and disconnected, like I was playing a character in some tragic story instead of living my actual life. I parked outside my brother's apartment complex at midnight and called him. Grant was 5 years older than me, divorced for 3 years after his own wife cheated, and the only person I knew who'd understand what I was feeling. "She cheated," I said when he answered, still sitting in my car. "She's pregnant. It's not mine." Silence. Then, "Where are you?" 20 minutes later, I was on his couch with a drink I barely touched, telling him everything. Grant listened without interrupting, his face getting harder with each detail. "What are you going to do?" he asked when I finished. "Divorce her," I said. The word felt strange coming out of my mouth. Final. Real. "Good," Grant said. "Because if you said anything else, I was going to beat some sense into you. The thing about betrayal this deep is that it doesn't hit you all at once. It comes in waves, each one pulling you under when you think you've finally caught your breath. That night at Grant's place, I just felt numb. Empty, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left behind this hollow shell that looked like me but didn't feel like me. I stayed at Grant's for 3 days. Grace called and texted constantly, begging me to come home so we could talk. She sent long messages about how sorry she was, how much she loved me, how she'd do anything to fix this. She promised counseling, complete transparency, whatever I needed to heal from this. But here's what she didn't seem to understand. There was no healing from this. No amount of therapy or tears or promises could undo what she'd done. She'd made her choice on that beach with Brandon, and now she had to live with the consequences. On day 4, I went home while she was at work, packed everything I needed into 2 suitcases and some boxes, clothes, important documents, my laptop, the few things in that house that actually mattered to me. I moved methodically, feeling nothing, like I was packing for a business trip instead of leaving my marriage. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter next to a note. Talk to a lawyer. I want a divorce. Then I went back to Grant's and started the process of dismantling a life I'd spent 6 years building. Grace showed up at Grant's apartment that night, crying and begging through the door. Grant sent her away with a few choice words about what she could do with her apologies. She tried coming back the next morning, but Grant had warned the building security that she wasn't welcome. I hired a lawyer the following week. Best money I've ever spent in my life. His name was Raymond Chen, a guy Grant's divorce attorney recommended. Mid-50s, completely no nonsense, with the kind of reputation that made opposing counsel nervous. His office was downtown in one of those buildings with marble floors and expensive art on the walls, the kind of place that screamed I win cases and charge accordingly. Our first consultation lasted 2 hours. I laid out everything. The timeline of the trip, the communication breakdown while she was gone, her confession, the pregnancy. I showed him texts, call logs, everything I'd been documenting since she'd returned. Raymond took notes in this precise handwriting, asking clarifying questions, building his case before we'd even officially hired him. Your case is straightforward, Raymond told me when I finished. Adultery, pregnancy by another man, clear timeline of events. Washington is a no-fault divorce state, so we don't technically need to prove fault, But having concrete evidence of infidelity strengthens our position on asset division and ensures you're not liable for any child-related expenses. He pulled out a legal pad and started sketching out our strategy. We'll file for divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences with supporting documentation of adultery. We'll push for a quick resolution since there are no children from the marriage and asset division should be relatively straightforward. Most importantly, we'll make absolutely certain you're not on the hook for anything related to that child. No paternity presumptions, no birth certificate complications, nothing. She's going to fight it, I said. She keeps calling and texting saying she wants to make it work. Raymond's expression was pure cynicism, probably earned through decades of watching marriages implode. They always do until the reality hits. Right now, she's in panic mode, realizing the full scope of what she's destroyed. Once she realizes reconciliation isn't happening, and she's facing single motherhood plus a public scandal plus losing her financial security, she'll settle. They always do. His retainer was $5,000. I wrote the check without hesitation, watching 6 years of marriage preparation transform into divorce proceedings. Money we'd saved for a someday kitchen remodel was now going toward legally extracting myself from the wreckage of my wife's betrayal. Raymond was meticulous in his preparation. Within 3 days, he'd filed preliminary paperwork establishing my intent to divorce. Within a week, he drafted a comprehensive divorce petition that laid out everything in cold, legal language that somehow made the betrayal even more real. Petitioner alleges irreconcilable differences have arisen, making continuation of the marriage impossible. Supporting documentation included date-stamped evidence of spouse's extended absence, documented admission of extramarital relations, and confirmed pregnancy by third party. He also filed immediate paperwork to ensure I wouldn't be presumed the father of Grace's child. In our state, there's this archaic law that presumes any child born during a marriage is the legal child of the husband unless paternity is formally challenged. Raymond wasn't taking chances. He filed documentation before the baby was even born, establishing a legal barrier between me and any financial responsibility for Brandon's mistake. "We're building a fortress," Raymond explained during one of our meetings. "Every possible angle covered, every potential complication addressed before it becomes a problem. By the time this is done, you'll walk away clean with no lingering legal entanglements." The divorce papers were served 2 weeks after my first meeting with Raymond. I had them delivered to her work during her lunch break, which probably makes me an asshole, but I was past caring about her feelings. She'd stopped caring about mine the moment she followed Brandon to that bungalow. The process server reported back that she'd cried in the parking lot for 20 minutes after reading the papers. Part of me felt guilty for about 3 seconds before remembering that she was carrying another man's baby and had destroyed our marriage for a drunken hookup with her best friend's husband. That's when things got messy. Really messy. Grace launched a full-scale campaign to save our marriage that would have been impressive if it wasn't so pathetic. She showed up at my office 3 times in the first week after being served. The first time, she made it to my desk before security escorted her out, crying and begging in front of my coworkers. My boss came out to see what the commotion was, and I had to explain in front of half my department that my wife had cheated and I was divorcing her. The second time, she waited in the parking lot and tried to corner me at my truck. I had to call building security while she screamed about how much she loved me. People recorded it on their phones. The third time, security spotted her before she even made it into the building and had her trespassed from the property. She sent flowers with cards begging for another chance. She sent handwritten letters, sometimes 5 pages long, detailing how we could raise Brandon's child together as our own if I'd just forgive her. That suggestion made me physically ill. She called and texted constantly. My phone would light up 50 times a day with messages ranging from desperate apologies to angry accusations. I blocked her number, so she started calling from other phones. She showed up at Grant's apartment multiple times, crying through the door until Grant threatened to call the cops. She sat outside in her car for 3 hours one night, just watching the building. She contacted everyone in my life. My parents got tearful phone calls. My mom actually called me after one conversation to suggest maybe I was being too harsh, that everyone makes mistakes. I had to remind my own mother that there's a difference between forgiving someone for missing an anniversary and forgiving someone for getting pregnant by their best friend's husband. She called my friends, trying to get them to convince me to give her another chance. Most shut her down immediately, but a few bought into her sob story. She even tried to get my boss to intervene, calling him directly to explain that I was making rash decisions I'd regret. He called me looking extremely uncomfortable and suggested I consider getting a restraining order. My mother called me after one particularly dramatic conversation with Grace. "She sounds genuinely sorry, sweetheart. Are you sure you don't want to at least try counseling?" "Mom, she cheated on me with her best friend's husband, and she's carrying his baby. What exactly am I supposed to work through here? Marriage is about forgiveness, my mother said gently. Nobody's perfect. There's a difference between forgiving someone for forgetting your birthday and forgiving someone for destroying your entire marriage. She made her choice. Now I'm making mine. The worst part was watching people actually debate whether I should take her back. Like it was even a question. Like the appropriate response to your wife getting pregnant by another man was understanding and forgiveness instead of running as fast as possible in the opposite direction. Then Melissa found out. And that's when everything truly exploded into a social nuclear war. I found out through Kelly, a mutual acquaintance who worked with Grace at the nonprofit. She called me one evening, voice hushed, like she was sharing classified information. You need to know what's happening. Melissa knows everything. She confronted Grace at the charity gala last night, and it was brutal. Apparently, Melissa had noticed Grace pulling away from their friendship. Being the direct person she was, Melissa had shown up at one of Grace's work events to demand answers. The confrontation happened in front of about 100 charity donors and nonprofit board members. Grace, never great under pressure, crumbled completely and confessed everything. Kelly said Melissa's scream could be heard through the closed doors. Then silence. Then Melissa's car peeling out of the parking lot at dangerous speeds. The fallout was nuclear. Melissa filed for divorce within 48 hours. Not regular people divorce either. Nuclear war divorce. She immediately froze all joint accounts, locked him out of their mansion by having the locks changed while he was at work, and filed every possible legal barrier to keep him away while she dismantled their shared life. But Melissa didn't stop at the legal warfare. She went scorched earth on their social circle too. Within a week, everyone in their wealthy friend group knew exactly what had happened. Dinner party conversations suddenly revolved around Brandon's betrayal, and Grace's role as the friend who destroyed everything. Invitations dried up completely. People who'd been friendly suddenly acted like Grace had a contagious disease. The social exile was systematic and brutal. Grace found herself completely cut off from the only social group she'd maintained since college. Even people who weren't particularly close to Melissa distanced themselves. Nobody wants to be associated with a woman who slept with her best friend's husband, especially in circles where reputation matters more than most things. Brandon's life imploded just as spectacularly. Business relationships became complicated. Partnerships dissolved. Golf club memberships were quietly revoked. His name got dropped from charity board positions. In their world, being publicly labeled as a cheater who knocked up his wife's best friend was worse than any financial crime. The nonprofit where Grace worked started getting awkward too. Several major donors were friends with Melissa, and their contributions suddenly became under review. Her boss called her in for a meeting about maintaining appropriate boundaries and representing the organization's values. She wasn't fired outright, but the writing was on the wall. Grace called me one night, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Everyone hates me. I've lost everything. My friends, my reputation, you. Please, I need you. I can't do this alone. You should have thought about that before you had an affair with Brandon, I said. It wasn't an affair. It was one mistake. One night that I've regretted every single day since. One night that resulted in a pregnancy. One night that destroyed 2 marriages. One night that showed me exactly who you are when you think you can get away with it. That's not who I am. I made a mistake. I'm not a bad person. You're right, I said. You're not a bad person. You're just a person who made a really, really bad choice and now has to live with the consequences. Good luck with that. I hung up and blocked her number. I was done being her emotional support while she dealt with the mess she'd created. The divorce was finalized 4 months after I'd filed. Grace had tried to drag it out, hoping I'd change my mind, but Raymond had been ruthless in pushing it through. We had no kids together, no complicated assets, no real reason to delay beyond her desperate hope that time would heal something that was beyond healing. She kept the house because her name was on the mortgage, and I had zero interest in living there anymore. I took my share of our savings, my car, and my freedom. Fair trade, in my opinion. The baby was born 6 weeks after our divorce was final. A boy. Dark hair, dark eyes, looks nothing like me and everything like Brandon according to the photo my mother showed me after talking to Grace's mother. Some things never change, including the neighborhood gossip network. Grace tried to put my name on the birth certificate anyway, which led to a brief legal battle that ended with the paternity test proving what everyone already knew. Brandon was the biological father, which meant he got stuck paying child support while dealing with his own messy divorce from Melissa. Karma's funny like that. I ran into Melissa about 6 months after everything imploded. She just moved into a new place downtown, was dating some guy who worked in tech, and looked better than I'd ever seen her. Happy, free. like she'd been carrying around dead weight and finally let it go. "How are you doing?" she asked when we grabbed coffee. "Better than expected," I said honestly. "You?" "Same. Turns out leaving a cheating husband is excellent for your mental health." She smiled, but there was an edge to it. "I heard Grace is struggling. Not my problem anymore." "Good," Melissa said firmly. "She doesn't deserve your sympathy after what she did to either of us." We talked for an hour. Two people who'd been collateral damage in someone else's selfish decision finding common ground in survival. She mentioned she was moving to Seattle next month for a fresh start. New city, new life, new everything. "You should do the same," she said. "Get out of here. Stop running into reminders." She had a point, but I was stubborn. This was my city, my home, my life. I wasn't the one who should have to leave and start over. That was for the people who'd screwed up, not the people who got screwed over. It's been a year now since Grace left for that trip. A year since my marriage ended in a luxury resort I'll never visit and can't even pronounce the name of. A year since I learned that sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who hurt you worst. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.